Okay, so we are back with Ladies Trek Library. I'm Kavura, and I'm here again with Jen. Hello, Jen.
Hi, Kavura. Great to be back.
Okay, so our book this month is Star Trek the Motion Picture, the novelization by Gene Roddenberry. And so on the back of the book, it says, "The great builder of the galaxy writes a Star Trek novel. The writer-producer who created Mr. Spock and all the other Star Trek characters, who invented the Starship Enterprise, who gave the show its look, its ideals, puts it all together again here in his first Star Trek novel. Their historic 5-year mission is over. Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Scotty, and all the crew have scattered to their other jobs or other lives. Now they are back together again in a fabulously refitted USS Enterprise as an incredibly destructive power threatens Earth and the human race." And then the book has the credits from the movie. So this one doesn't really say much about the plot, but I think people want to read it because it's for the movie and because, hey, this is the first one written by Gene Roddenberry, and I think the only one.
Yeah, that was, I always enjoy the novelizations anyway, but the fact that it was written by Gene Roddenberry was another reason that made this more interesting. So you get an idea of, his views on things, and I think we're going to talk later in our discussion about canon, but we know that the novels aren't canon, but since this one was written by Gene Roddenberry, gives you an idea of what he maybe wanted to be canon.
Yes, and the things he threw in this book, there were, it really stuck closely to the movie, and like a lot of the lines and all were exactly from the movie, but there were a few things that he threw in the book that were not in the movie. I know one thing was the saying that Captain Kirk and all the Starfleet officers have this implant in their minds. And so Kirk could actually see the destruction of the Klingon ships that happened at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, the implant was really interesting. That was a surprise because it wasn't in the movie, and I don't recall ever reading another novel where those type of implants were mentioned. So that was interesting. And also, in the beginning, when Kirk receives that message through his implant, he's on Earth, but he's in Gibraltar, and it's kind of like Roddenberry's idea of what the planet is going to be like in the future, where there's, the Mediterranean Sea no longer exists. It's been drained, and some of the land masses we know have come together. So it's kind of interesting.
Yes, the scenery, the fact that people can just travel more easily in the future. But the idea of the implant, it just seems like, I wonder if that's something that he intended to use later or something, because he never used it later. It was never in Star Trek, on the show, or in any of the other movies.
Yeah, it does make you wonder if that was something that he wanted to use. Why wasn't it used later, in like TNG or Deep Space Nine or Voyager, when Roddenberry was still alive? Interesting.
Or if they just thought it wasn't feasible. And then, of course, the woman, Lori Sienna, who was an admiral, she was in this novel as someone that Kirk was involved with, and then she was in the transporter accident. In the movie, there was a transporter accident that we knew had Commander Sonak and a woman. I think they just called it Sonak and his party or something. So the book reveals that was this woman that Kirk had a romantic relationship with.
Yeah, that was interesting too. Although even though I had not read this book before, that character has been used in a lot of the other novels. So I was familiar with her as a character, and in other novels, she was involved with Kirk and Kirk's wife for a time in like a contract relationship. But yeah, the movie never mentions who was the person who was killed in the transporter accident with Sonak. So we don't know. So it was interesting.
And speaking of that, wasn't that accident terrible? That was like one of the most horrible scenes we've ever seen on Star Trek.
Yeah, and it was actually, I think, worse in the book than in the movie, which is you wouldn't normally
Yeah.
say that. Normally on screen something's worse, but like he really went into detail about the agony that they were going through and describing how they were being torn apart. And I was kind of reading it like, oh,
Really?
like
Yeah, that you could see their organs or something. It was, yeah.
yeah, disturbing. But another interesting thing in the beginning, although it actually wasn't the first time used, but Kirk makes use of something that's sort of like a hollow suite, which we did have in the animated series, although, I guess now it's considered canon, but for a while that wasn't. It was up for, up in the air whether the animated series was canon. So there's a hollow suite, and then Kirk talking to some of the admirals in Starfleet as holograms. And that made me think about, is that where the Discovery writers got the idea from, that they had read this novel where Kirk is using the, talking instead of on a screen to holograms, because it's not used, again, it's not used later on in TNG or Voyager or Deep Space Nine, doesn't come back until Discovery.
Yeah, which is in the past, right?
Right.
Yeah, yeah. It is interesting that they did that. And of course, they tried to explain it on Discovery too by saying Pike took those out because he didn't like them, so that's why they didn't use them again for a long time. Which still doesn't really work for me, but okay. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And so another thing that, the movie, I mean, or in the book, they had this interesting scene where Spock went to meditate, and he's like, there was some kind of an alcove where he could go to and sit quietly and meditate. And that part wasn't in the movie. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that's right. I now realized, as I was reading it, I was trying to keep in my mind, was this in the movie or not? And I had seen the movie a while ago, and I couldn't remember a lot of the details. And then I saw it again in September when they re-aired it for the 40th anniversary. But like, I fell asleep in the theater, not for
Oh,
a
you
long
did
time.
that this time?
Yeah.
Really?
I was like, I have been up late at night, and it was like at 2 o'clock was the showing time, and it was just like it was like 90 degrees out. I was really tired. It was like, I think it was the part like where, I don't know if it was in the beginning where, it's like the very long scene where they're going up to the, him and Scotty are heading up to the Enterprise. But I remember like, I fell asleep for a minute.
Oh,
It's not that I hate the movie. I know a lot of people really don't like it, and it's actually, I mean, it's not my favorite movie, Star Trek movie, but it's not my least favorite either.
well, it's slow in some parts. So, I mean, yeah, everybody says that, and I get it too. I mean, I know it was. Um, and I mean, that can be the next thing we talk about, just about how it was. The book was paced a lot better, just because you don't have to sit through all those long visual scenes, because the book just keeps the pace going.
Yeah, I agree. And now, of course, there's different versions. Like I've seen the extended version or whatever, the longer one where the scene with Kirk and Scotty going up to the Enterprise, it feels like it takes forever watching it. But reading in the book, it didn't take that long. It was actually pretty quick. And I was like, oh yeah, it's a much faster pace in the book than the movie.
Yeah, there's always something happening in the book, and then and also the long scenes where they're going through Voyager, and they're just looking at things inside as they're going through, and that's like, I mean, it's nice to look at, but it's a little too long. You're just thinking, can't we get on with it?
Yeah. But I also thought that uh, one thing that made it better than the movie, and I mean, I guess to me, maybe books are always better than movies because you can do so much more in a book that you can't do on screen. Um, but you got more characterizations, more idea of what's going on in the characters' heads. So that made it more interesting too. Whereas I think on screen, a lot of it, you just didn't see that as much.
Yeah, with the book, it gets more into what the characters are thinking, and yeah. So, what did you think about the character development in the book compared to the movie?
I liked it a lot better. It was interesting going into it. One thing I wondered about it was in the movie, Kirk comes across as kind of a jerk. he comes along and he's very arrogant and taking the ship back from Decker, and you kind of, I remember watching it and thinking, yeah, he's kind of got a big head. He's really acting like a jerk. And I wondered reading the book, would I think that he's less of a jerk, reading his motivations? But the book actually made him seem like more of a jerk, because you could see he's, even McCoy challenges him, saying, you're doing this because you want the Enterprise back, and it's not really because you think you're the best person for the job. And he kind of considers it, and he kind of admits it to himself that, that he's doing it. But then at the end, he's like, well, but I don't care. I want this shit back.
Yeah.
So if I'm being a jerk, oh well, I'm going to do what I want.
I mean, I felt like that too. Kirk was, he was very stale in this, and until the end, he was very determined in what he was trying to do, and pushing Decker. The good thing about it is he does kind of, later in the book, he does kind of warm up to Decker. He starts seeing that Decker is very competent, even if he's young and inexperienced. He still was qualified to be the captain. I mean, he can still do a good job as captain of a ship.
Yeah, I think the book also made Decker look better than in the movie. Because in the movie, I think audiences were all kind of biased. We love Kirk, and this young guy, and he's no Captain Kirk. But in the book, you realize he's really knows the ship well, and there are a few scenes where it's clear that he actually has a better understanding of the new ship than Kirk, and that he is a really good leader.
Yeah, which embarrasses Kirk about the wormhole thing, when Decker's the one that knew the phasers would be cut off, and which brings up the point. I mean, Kirk was unfamiliar with the ship, so it is kind of strange that he did take command. But I guess you still have to go through all that and get through the movie and all, and it worked out. And one other thing, the book does mention that Decker is the son of Matt Decker from the episode The Doomsday Machine.
Yes.
Because everybody picked up on the name Decker and wondered if he was related. And so the book finally reveals that, yes, it is his son.
Yeah, because there actually have been a lot of the other novels where they talk about that. But yeah, it's good that he confirmed that that's why he chose the name. Otherwise, it would have been like kind of a big coincidence, right?
Yeah. And so, what did you feel about Gene's writing? Do we think he's a good writer?
I thought it was really good. There was a whole bunch of speculation. I'm sure you've heard a lot of people claim that he didn't really write it, that it was actually written by Alan Dean Foster, was the ghostwriter. But I mean, apparently that's not true from what I've read. That was just a rumor. I mean, I thought it was good. I didn't know what to expect, since Gene, hadn't written novels. But I thought he did a really good job with it.
He uses an experienced writer, because he's written a lot of TV shows. It was just like, this is just his first novel. But yeah, I thought it was a good book, and I think I could kind of tell though that it was. I mean, somehow the tone of it was just different from other books. Maybe it took itself more seriously, but it was still a well-written book. And I have read a discussion of people saying that that they can tell that it's amateurish, and so yeah, it had to have been written by Gene and not by Alan Dean Foster. Well, maybe, but I still thought it was good though. It had enough technical stuff, it had enough character development that it made an interesting story. I mean, it wasn't like it was, it wasn't quite like fanfic. It wasn't quite as bad as some people who really have no writing experience.
No, and I mean, yeah, Gene is an experienced writer, but of course you don't know how it's going to translate when someone who writes screenplay, which is really different than writing novels.
Yeah.
But I didn't really, to me, it didn't feel amateurish. I thought it was good. I mean, it's not, if I was looking at all the Star Trek books that I read, I'm not going to say he's up there with some of the best ones. But I certainly thought it was good, and I wouldn't have like, had I not known he was the author, if I just picked it up and read it, I wouldn't really think it was amateurish. I thought it did keep
Yeah.
pretty close to the movie. So in that sense, if he had written a completely original story that wasn't on screen, maybe with them we'd have a better idea of how good of a writer he is as far as novels. Whereas I think on this one he was trying to just, depict the movie.
Right. Well, another thing, I mean, just to say, like, Gene put his mark on the book because there was stuff, the scenes he wrote about sex in the book when they were talking about it. I mean, a lot of people think, yeah, Gene wrote it because of all the stuff about sex and about Ilea and the oath of celibacy and other things that were in the book. Did you pick up on that?
Yeah, because that was the one thing when you sent me the outline for this and you mentioned about what was different in the movie, and I couldn't really remember. I was trying to keep them straight in my head. Was this in the movie or wasn't it? Like, maybe it was, but definitely the one that stood out to me is, in the book, he basically says that Decker had sex with the Ilea probe, which obviously was not in the movie.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like,
it was a G-rated movie.
Right? Did they need to put that in the book?
Really? I mean, they didn't even imply it in the movie.
No.
But then you're reading the book and it's like, oh, okay. I mean, and it was so Decker did it with this probe. I mean, it wasn't even actually her.
Yeah, it was a bit creepy. But of course he did it, in the book he does it because, he's trying to reach the consciousness, because Gene explains that Deltans, when you have sex with them, you can link your consciousness, I guess, somewhat like a Vulcan mind meld, and Decker was trying to reach the consciousness of V'ger, and that's why he did it.
He did explain that. Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah. But the way, the book had a chapter that was from V'ger's point of view, and it said that it was more subtle in that part about the probe was experiencing something and V'ger just cut it off, and that was the time that Ilea and Decker were together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that was
and I read this book like when I was. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I read the book when it first came out. I mean, I must have been 10 or 11 or something, but I do not remember that. I don't think I picked up on that as a child, that's what was going on there.
Yeah. But that was, you mentioned the point of view of V'ger, and that was one thing that I thought was cool about the book, because obviously you can't really do that in the movies. It did give us a little bit, not much, but a little perspective from V'ger, and that made it interesting to see, its consciousness and how it viewed humans, and why, a little bit more understanding into why it viewed humans as an infestation, because it just couldn't understand that life existed in that form, I guess the same way like we might. Not even the same way. I mean, I guess an example would be the way humans look at like an insect, but it didn't even register that it was even an insect. Maybe like more like a cancer cell or.
Yeah, something not. Yeah, I mean, a much lower life form than itself is how it saw humans, like, or not even as a life form.
Yeah, as an infestation, like
Yeah.
So that was neat to see that perspective, and to see how it sort of gave a bit of V'ger's perspective from the time it left the planet of the machines in its journey, before it got to the Klingon ships, and you get a little background that shows you really how dangerous it is, because before it even came into contact with the Klingon ships, it made it clear that it had come across some other worlds that were inhabited, and it had, basically destroyed all life on those planets because, it viewed them as a threat to its journey.
And that is, that it really enhances the story to know that. I mean, because we didn't get any of that from the movie. We didn't know about its past, that it had done that.
Yeah, it definitely enhanced the story.
And another new thing in this book too was the idea of the new humans. Wasn't that something weird? And I mean, that like Gene added that in, and it's another thing that never was on any other version of Star Trek.
Yeah, that, he had the beginning, the book had like a preface by Admiral Kirk, and then a preface by the author, by Roddenberry himself, who, is pretending to be the person who has documented the life of the 5-year mission of Star Trek.
Yes.
And so, and he mentions, Kirk mentions in the Kirk's preface about the new humans and the primitives. And Kirk refers to himself and the other Starfleet officers as the primitives, and talks about why the new humans don't make good space explorers, because they become so fascinated with other life forms that they want to just,
join them or something?
Join them, yeah, or not neglect their duties because they want to learn about other life forms. There wasn't enough on that. It was kind of confusing.
Yeah, it was. It was just, it was just there. So you have these people called new humans, and they're supposed to be like more advanced people. I'm not sure if they were genetically enhanced like Khan's people, but I kind of took it as they did say it was something like it was a whole group. They were not individuals. They were a group that, they didn't see themselves as individuals. They were part of a group, and they just didn't make good space explorers. It was something interesting to think about, if nothing else.
Yeah, and I have the quote here where he says, Kirk is talking about meaning we Starfleet officers, are not part of those increasingly large numbers of humans who seem willing to submerge their own identities into the groups to which they belong. Now, having seen the movie and knowing what happens, it's clear to me, that he's talking about that we're going to end up meaning that Decker is one of these new humans, because he ends up submerging his, identity. But if you hadn't seen the movie and you just read this, it's like he doesn't really elaborate, and it's just like, it kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Okay, yeah. So,
but
we think it.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say one other part in the beginning that's interesting, because it kind of gives you an idea about Gene's ideas about the future. So I had mentioned, he thinks the Mediterranean Sea has been drained and people are now, doing all these different sort of technologies. But he mentions that the male surname has become rare. And so that Kirk and other Starfleet officers who are these primitives are the few people who continue to use a male surname. But then he doesn't elaborate, and it makes you wonder, so what are other people using? Are they using a female surname or not a surname? It was kind of an interesting little, and then another little interesting bit in there when he's talking about Lori Siana is, he mentions that they were in like a contract marriage, and that gets picked up a lot in the novels, and I guess they all got it from reading this book. Because I've seen a lot of the earlier Star Trek novels from like the 80s where there's this idea of when you get married, you sign a marriage contract for a year or 2 years or whatever, and then you either renew or don't renew. And so it seemed like that was Gene's idea of where marriage was heading in the future.
Yes, yeah, I got that too, and it has been used before, and I just thought, well, I don't know, I don't really want to do that. I wouldn't want that to be how we do things, but it must have been how Gene thought things should be, because we know he had that first marriage that didn't work out.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, putting some of his personal things into it.
Or just maybe like a hippie-ish view of the future, where people,
right.
Yeah.
Like he did, yeah, like it's like he threw a lot of the stuff in because he thought that the future would be that way, I guess, but then it didn't really go into the story, because the story was completely different.
Yeah.
So, what do you think, like, from the book that should be canon? Well, we mentioned a lot of the stuff in the book that wasn't in the movie really never became part of Star Trek, never was really used in it.
Yeah, I think I don't know. It's hard to say, since should the whole book be considered canon, since it was all Roddenberry's ideas, and maybe he wanted all of it to be on screen, but there just wasn't time. It was considered a long movie anyway, and then they had to cut stuff out. But like, you could at least say Decker being Matt Decker's son, Lori Sienna.
Yeah, what was Kirk's wife for a year. Yeah, things like that. The other things, yeah, I guess that the meat of the novel, the parts that were in the movie, all of that, works with canon pretty well, and it has for years. So I guess the extra parts of the book were, not as necessary. It was just something that makes the story better for us.
Yeah, and I guess the bit about Spock, because we do get a little bit more background on this about Spock's experience going through the Kolinar, and it was a little different than in the movie, because in the book, on the one hand, so the movie makes it seem completely like Spock is, he's about to go through the final ritual of the Kolinar, and he feels that Earth is in danger because he recognizes the consciousness of Beecher. It's calling out to him. And that is in the book, but also in the book, Spock feels Jim's conscious. He feels Kirk's fear, that the Earth is going to be destroyed. And I don't remember that being in the movie where you got that. So that was a little different. And of course he calls him in the book he uses the word, which I don't know how to pronounce, Tahila. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I say. Yeah, I picked up on that word the first time I read the book, and I always remembered it because I thought it was neat. Yeah, a new Vulcan word that they never used again.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder. There's been a lot of speculation about that. Of course, this book has some footnotes with editor's notes that Gene has put in, and he mentions that it's a concept that means friend, but it can also mean brother or lover. Now, reading it here, I just imagined it to mean, that he thinks of Kirk as a brother, and that's why he was able to sense his emotions from so far away. But of course, a lot of people took up on the lover, and that's why we have a lot of the slapstick.
Yeah.
But that has never picked up again. So that makes you wonder, that would be interesting if that sort of thing was canon.
And I did hear that the reason Gene put it in there was to make sure that people knew that Kirk and Spock were friends and not lovers, because Gene was, as people seem to think, he was homophobic and wouldn't want Kirk and Spock to be lovers. It never was really hinted that they were lovers in any of the episodes.
No, and he actually says in here, this is Kirk saying, "I was never aware of this lovers rumor, although I've been told that Spock encountered it several times." And then he, goes on describing it a bit, and then he ends up saying, "Also, I would dislike being thought of as so foolish that I would select a love partner who came into sexual heat only once every 7 years."
Yeah, that was funny. and then Kirk also saying that he's always been interested in, the way he said it, that creature called woman. In other words, like he would never be interested in a man because he has always loved women, and that is the way he's presented on screen.
Yeah, it says, "As for myself, although I have no moral or other objections to physical love in any of its many earthly, alien, and mixed forms, I've always found my best gratification in that creature, woman." Yes. I was laughing when I read that because I was like, oh, yeah, Gene's saying, nope, that's not what I meant when I was writing these two characters. But, that's not going to stop people from writing it.
Right. So, overall impressions of the book?
I liked it. I thought it was a good companion piece to the movie, although it did not contain as much background as, I have read the novelization. The only other novelization that I've read of a movie is Star Trek V. I've read novelizations of some of the episodes. And usually you get a lot of more background detail. And this one wasn't as much, but I still thought it was good. And I found I'd rather read the book again than watch the movie again.
I did think it was a good book. And I mean, the other novelizations I read a long time ago. I actually think the others added even more to the story than this one did. But this was still good. I mean, it's not, my favorite book or anything, but I think it was a good story and it is worth reading. And because I mean, it does develop the characters more. You know more about what's in their minds and what drives them. I mean, one thing about this story, so it is more about Kirk and Spock and a little bit of McCoy, but the other regular characters, Scotty, Uhura, Chekhov, and Sulu, they don't really appear as much. And I mean, they don't really get any character development. It's really more of a Kirk Spock story.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and that's what I meant the same thing as you were saying. Of the episode and movie novelizations that I read, this one has the least additional information. The other ones all give you a lot more background to those episodes or movies, and this one not quite as much. And yeah, it's pretty much only Kirk, Spock, Decker, Ilea, and a little bit of Chapel. So we get to see her a little more. I don't know if that's because she was played by Gene's wife, but still nice to see her again. And she actually got more character development in this, I feel like, than Uhura, Scotty, and Chekhov. They really didn't get much. And Sulu.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, she appeared in the novel more. Yes.
And he also brought. I mean, she was in the movie, of course, but brought back Janice Rand, so that was nice to see her back.
Yeah, just like a cameo, but it was great to see her.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's it then. So we've got 2 thumbs up for this novel. Great. And this novel was of course it was just re-released a couple of months ago. So I think everybody is rereading it now. And also because the movie was just re-released.
Do you know, I have not, my copy is like an actual old copy, so it's from, 1979. I don't have the re-release, so I'm curious about whether the re-release contained any additional information.
Oh, I haven't heard. But yeah, that would be interesting, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I shall have to look into that. Now, we were reading this in the Star Trek reading group as well on Facebook, and one of the other readers he has an older copy as well, but his copy contains stills from the movie. And he posted a picture of one of them. It was interesting. It was the transporter scene. And in the movie, even in the transporter scene, it's really kind of fast and you don't see that much. But the stills actually kind of show these like two people like sort of moving in agony, kind of like more described in the book. And that was in the still. So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I do want to see that. I didn't want to do it until after we do this podcast. Because just so that I wouldn't be influenced by any of those, but I do want to see that. Okay, so I guess we're through. So our book for January will be No Time Like the Past by Greg Cox, a book that has Kirk and 7 of 9. So we look forward to that. And thanks again, Jen, for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me back, and I look forward to our next book. Kirk 7 of 9 matchup seems like something that might be in fanfic, but Greg Cox is an excellent author, so if anyone can pull it off in a good way, I think he can.
Yes, he can do it in a way that that is honorable and yes, and not too down there in the mud or something.
Right. I'm sure there have been probably if we look now, we could find quite a few Kirk 7 of 9 fanfic stories that are down in the mud.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and join our Facebook group. Live long and may the force be with you. Nanu Nanu.